جمعية السين أن تشكل الجمعية بما يضمن أنها تضم كافة أطياف المجتمع المصري بشكل عادل، خاصة فيما يتعلق بالتمثيل الجغرافي والمرأة والأقباط
هو ده بالظبط اللي موجود هنا.
وأن يمثل أساتذة القانون والعلوم السياسية والخبراء وإلى آخره. أنا موافق على كل ده.
اللي يجي وما يحترمش القانون والدستور الشعب هيثور ضده. انا عايز الشعب يثور ضدي على طول لو انا ما احترمش القانون والدستور.
الدكتور محمد مرسي عيسى العياط 13,230,000.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أقسم بالله العظيم أن أحافظ مخلصا على النظام الجمهوري، وأن أحترم الدستور والقانون، وأن أرعى مصالح الشعب رعاية كاملة، وأن أحافظ على استقلال الوطن وسلامة أراضيه.
جئت إليكم لأنني مؤمن تماما بأنكم مصدر السلطة والشرعية التي تعلو على الجميع، تعلو على الجميع. لا مكان لأحد ولا لمؤسسة ولا هيئة ولا جهة فوق هذه الإرادة.
يكون لمصر ابدا دستور كما يقول البعض يعبر عن فئة دون فئة. الشعب المصري مش هيوافق، مش هيوافق. لن اعرض المقترح على الشعب الا اذا رايت توافقا من الكل قبل ان يعرض. هذا امر منتهي.
Are you prepared to take the oath, Senator?
I am.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
That I will execute the office of President to the United States faithfully.
That I will execute
the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States faithfully.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President. All the best wishes, Mr. President. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President. Well done.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, amidst the international humiliation and farce that we've suffered with our abortive war on Syria, there are two good things the President has done, and they need to be noted. Last night, he stepped back from an international crisis that could have had catastrophic consequences by deferring to the Russian diplomatic initiative. Thank God. And last week, he stepped back from a constitutional crisis by deferring to Congress the decision over whether to go to war, as the Constitution requires.
While I agree that the President doesn't have the authority to take our country into war, President Obama has not stepped back from his insistence that he has the right to attack Syria, as I point out in this video. And look at him arrogantly refusing to give a straight answer that he won't do it.
And I still haven't heard a direct response to Brianna's question. If Congress fails to authorize this, will you go forward with an attack on Syria?
Right, and you're not getting a direct response.
But I agree with the rest of Representative McClintock's statements here.
I've been deeply troubled by suggestions from many otherwise responsible officials and commentators from both parties that the President has independent authority as Commander-in-Chief to order an attack on other countries when he deems it necessary. This cuts right to the core of our Constitution's design, and it evinces an alarming deterioration of the popular understanding of the separation of powers that keeps us free. There is nothing more clear in the American Constitution than that Congress has the sole authority to decide the question of war or peace. Only after Congress has made that decision does the President, as Commander-in-Chief, have the authority to execute that decision. For centuries, European monarchs had plunged their nations into bloody and debilitating wars on whim, and the Constitution's framers wanted to protect the American Republic from that fate. They understood that a president, for example, might someday paint himself into a rhetorical corner and feel compelled to save face by exercising force. That is precisely why they entrusted that fateful decision to the Congress. James Madison, the father of the American Constitution, said that its single most important feature was the provision that gave the Congress, and not the President, the authority to go to war. Here's what he wrote in 1793, quote, "In no part of the Constitution is more wisdom to be found than in the clause which confides the question of war or peace to the legislature and not to the executive department. The trust and the temptation would be too great for any one man. War is in fact the true nurse of executive aggrandizement. In war a physical force is to be created, and it is the executive will which is to direct it. In war the public treasures are to be unlocked, and it's the executive hand which is to disperse them. Those who are to conduct a war cannot, in the nature of things, be proper or safe judges of whether a war ought to be commenced, continued, or concluded," end quote. In Federalist 69, Alexander Hamilton wrote that one of the most important differences between the British king and the American president is that the king can plunge his nation into war on his command, but that the American president has no such authority. The Constitutional Convention gave careful consideration to the clause that provides that Congress shall declare war. They chose that word carefully to make clear that the only independent war-making power of the President is to repel an attack. The War Powers Act makes this explicit, that absent congressional authority, the President can only order our armed forces into hostility in response to, quote, a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States, its armed forces, or its territories or possessions, unquote. Anything else requires prior congressional action. The United Nations Participation Act, by which we entered the UN, requires Congress to act before American forces are ordered into hostilities in UN actions. The War Powers Act specifically forbids inferring from any treaty the power to order American forces into hostilities without specific congressional authorization. Now, some have used the past violation of this constitutional stricture, for example in Kosovo or most recently in Libya, as justifying it to violate it now. That is precisely the point. If any violation of this fundamental constitutional provision can be used as justification for its outright nullification, well then any such violation must be vigorously resisted, lest we lose for all time the most important check on the most momentous decision that a government can make, to go to war. War is destruction on a massive scale. To unlawfully initiate such a thing is the highest crime that a public official could possibly commit. Indeed, if the power of impeachment were not intended for such an act as that, I cannot imagine what it would be for. The President was absolutely right not to cross that line. I yield back.
Is Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She's an Iraq War veteran. She is a major in the Army National Guard, and she serves on both the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Congresswoman Gabbard, thanks for joining me. ISIS took control of Ramadi in May. As you know, that was an embarrassing defeat for the Iraqi army. If Iraqi security forces do succeed in retaking Ramadi this time around, are you confident that this time they can keep ISIS out?
Jake, I think it's too early to tell. Quite frankly, I think a lot is going to depend on how the people there in Ramadi are going to be treated by the occupying forces who will remain there after this battle is won. And that's a key thing that we've got to focus on here, because we've seen in previous battles, as you've mentioned, with other cities where the battle has been won, but you've seen how the sectarian tensions have completely gotten in the way, where the people there in these Sunni communities were persecuted, and it allowed the space for ISIS to come back in and take over.
The Pentagon says that the only role the U.S. military is playing in this attempt to retake Ramadi is air support. Should U.S. troops be doing more, maybe even special forces on the ground hunting and killing ISIS fighters?
Well, I think generally what I have long called for is having these hubs throughout the region in different places where our special forces can operate from and conduct quick strike attacks against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and these other Islamic extremist groups. There in Iraq, it's going to be critical, especially within these Sunni communities, that you empower the Sunni tribes, that you equip them and you arm them so that they can fight these fights. And then, more importantly, for the long term, that you have a plan in place to govern and secure these territories. And this is why I've long called for a three-state solution, arming and empowering the Kurds in the north, the Sunnis and the Shia, and having some form of three-state semi-autonomous or autonomous region. And frankly, I think something similar is what's needed in Syria as well.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, during the Democratic debate, she said, "We are where we need to be in the fight against ISIS." Are we?
I would heartily disagree with that. We've got a strategy that's being executed, frankly, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I've been calling for an end to the counterproductive illegal war to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad, and very specifically talking about how dangerous a no-fly zone in Syria would be. We heard the president talk the other day about his opposition to a no-fly zone. But at the same time, we've heard from many of our presidential candidates how they're advocating for a no-fly zone. I don't see how your head can be screwed on straight if you're pushing for a no-fly zone when we hear people like Chris Christie and Marco Rubio saying that they would shoot down a Russian plane that violates that no-fly zone, kicking off a U.S.-Russia war, an escalation to a world war or a nuclear war. This is something that points to a very important issue, which is the fact that our political leaders are not operating with a military mindset. This is something that I and other young officers learned very early on in the military, which is before you go out and execute a certain course of action, you've got to look at what are the consequences. How will your enemy or other actors react to that course of action? And once they react, what will your response to that be? And then what will their response to that be? And continue to go down layer by layer. So if you look at what's happening in the Middle East now, the mess that we're in today can be pointed directly, starting with the Bush administration and continuing to today, with that lack of military mindset, that lack of foresight, whether you're talking about overthrowing Saddam in Iraq, Gaddafi in Libya, the Arab Spring, Mubarak in Egypt, and now Assad in Syria.
So just to make sure I understood, you disagree with Secretary Clinton. You do not think we are where we need to be.
We are not where we need to be. We should have been,
Let me just ask you this last question because we're running out of time. President Obama told NPR that, in his view, the biggest problem in the ISIS fight is not the strategy itself. He says it's that his administration could be communicating better what they're doing and that we in the media are over-covering the terrorist attacks. Do you agree? Are those the main problems in the fight against ISIS?
I respectfully but completely disagree. This is not a so-called communication problem or issue. There is far more that we should be doing. There should be adjustments and corrections made to this strategy so that we're actually focusing on defeating and destroying our enemy, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, these other Islamic extremist groups. I keep pointing back to Syria because it makes no sense how on the one hand we can be, the United States can be waging war to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad, which is exactly what ISIS wants, so that they can take over all of Syria, and on the other hand say that we're fighting and trying to destroy ISIS. You can't be doing two things at the same time that are completely opposed to each other.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much. I hope you have a happy new year and a great holiday in Hawaii.
Impact segment tonight, an outrageous situation concerning criminal aliens who are convicted of violent crimes here in the USA. Thousands of them were released by the feds last year and are running around the country right now. The Center for Immigration Studies reports that 193 convicted killers will let go, 426 convicted sex offenders, 303 kidnappers, and more than 1,000 criminals convicted of aggravated assault. Why is this happening? We asked Lou Dobbs to look into it, and here he is. So why is this happening?
It's happening because the Department of Homeland Security and our president decided it would happen. It is that simple. It is a policy of Immigration Customs Enforcement, a part of Homeland Security, to release these people. They're making it's a demonstration.
After they serve their time in prison, right?
No.
They don't even have to serve their time.
No, they don't even have to go to prison. In fact, these folks are being released so that the Department of Homeland Security can demonstrate to all of us, the great unwashed, that they don't really need those 32,000 detainee beds that they have, and that if you are an illegal immigrant, you don't even have to be an illegal immigrant in this case, because we don't know how many of these were illegal immigrants.
But it really doesn't matter, does it? If you commit a violent crime or a felony in the USA, you're out of here. You're out of here. You're gone. It should be the next day, unless it's murder or something like that. Look, they released a bunch of murderers, and I can't believe that they didn't serve any time. They must have served some time. Well, they get out, that's when the problem starts, because their home country doesn't want them back.
Well, there are a couple of questions here that the Department of Homeland Security won't answer, and we're asking. I talked with a woman, Jessica Vaughn, of the Centers for Immigration Studies, who authored the report. They can't even find out where these people were released, under what circumstances, what parts of the country, and whether or not they can really follow up and recapture them. There are only 20,000 ICE agents in the country. They're starting out with 36,000 people they would have to recapture.
It's almost beyond belief, but there was a Supreme Court ruling back in 2001 that said that the Homeland Security, the U.S. government, cannot detain an immigrant, illegal or otherwise, indefinitely.
Right.
So what happens is they get convicted of a terrible crime here, all right, whether they have a green card legally or they're illegal. Right. They serve some time, because there's packs of illegal aliens and in the nation's prisons. Then they get out, their time is up. And Algeria says, you know what, we're not taking them back. Don't put them on a plane back here. Or China, or any country. Right. So then they're nationless. They don't have anywhere to go. And the U.S. government can't keep them in a pen, so they're walking around doing what they want.
But interestingly, Bill, these murderers, these people convicted of homicide, just take that group of people.
Yeah.
What difference does that make? They should not be unleashed on society. It is the choice of this president.
But what would you do? Because this is the question. Of course, in theory, you don't let these people out. But if their country's not going to take them back, and you don't want them here, you drop them in the ocean? What do you do with them?
I would strongly recommend that if you are dealing with convicted murderers, now this is just me guessing wildly, I'm hardly an expert, but I don't think I would turn convicted killers loose on American society.
Where would you put them, though?
I think they would be left in the prison in which they find themselves.
Okay, but then you're violating the Supreme Court decision that you can't detain them indefinitely.
Not necessarily, because that doesn't pertain first to homicide. Secondly, it's for an indefinite period of time.
But the judge gives them 12 to life, and then they get out in 15, and they're walking around. But this is a scandal, another scandal, and I think that...
and by the way, it's a repetition of a scandal a year that preceded it by a year, in which the Department of Homeland Security just simply decided Immigration and Customs Enforcement released 2,000 offenders into society, and had plans to release thousands more. The House Judiciary Committee caught them in midstream of that catch and
it's
release.
Bad. There's no doubt about it.
It's madness.
All right, Lou, thank you. And we might mention that Lou Dobbs has a new book out. It is called Border War, a novel. Nice gift for Father's Day.
And welcome back to Hannity Tonight. Nearly 8 years after President Obama was elected on the mantle of hope and change, his hometown of Chicago is facing a hopeless epidemic of violent shootings. Now, this story is not getting the attention that it deserves from the mainstream media, and as the death toll in Chicago continues to climb, well, the president himself has been noticeably quiet. Now, for example, look at some of the recent headlines from the Windy City. According to the Chicago Tribune, just yesterday, 3 people killed, 7 others wounded. But that's not all. Chicago's children are all too often becoming victims of this violent crime epidemic. Could you imagine waking up and reading these headlines? Like, for example, June 20th, quote, 3-year-old boy critically injured in Woodlawn shooting. June 29th, 4-year-old child shot in the face in Parkway Gardens. July 2nd, father, 2 children killed in Hazel Crest shooting. July 5th, cousins 5 and 8 shot while playing with sparklers. July 6th, 4-year-old shot in the back and drive-by on South Side. And sadly, we could go on and on. Now, since the president took office, there have been at least 3,470 murders in Chicago, and by the way, many others shot. So why doesn't our commander-in-chief speak out about this when he rushes to judgment in Ferguson with Trayvon Martin, the Cambridge police? Now, during this segment tonight, on the right side of your screen, we're going to be scrolling through the names of people murdered in the Windy City only going back to January 2015. 3,470 killed in Chicago since Obama's been president, and I bet you have not heard of any of these names. Here now with reaction is former 2016 GOP presidential candidate Ben Carson. Dr. Carson, why does the president only weigh in on high-profile racial shootings and ignore 3,470 dead Chicago residents, his hometown? We don't know these names. We haven't heard these names. Why does he only weigh in on those other incidents?
Well, it's not just him. It's also the mainstream media. Why are they not concerned about the carnage that is going on, innocent children being killed? It represents such an incredible hypocrisy and double standard. Those lives matter also. And you think about, how did those kids get injured? They were injured by people who have a blatant disregard for the sanctity of life of the people who are around them. Those lives matter nothing to them. Why are we not going after those people?
I think that's a great point. You know, it's very frustrating. Even today, this guy, DeRay McKesson from Black Lives Matter, a group that has chanted pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon, what do we want, dead cops, when do we want them now? This guy that's a member of that group, some of the members have chanted these things, and one Black Lives Dallas chapter said, oh, this Texas shooting of 5 officers is justified. These killer cops have been killing our black men and women every day and getting away with it. I have no sympathy whatsoever for those cops or their families. They didn't give a damn when it's our black men and women. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Why is this guy at the White House today on the day they're burying these police officers?
It's pretty amazing. And, you know, I suspect if all of a sudden the police said, okay, we get your point. We're leaving. You guys are on your own. Then they would be saying, you're racist, you're prejudiced against us, you don't want to protect us. I mean, the hypocrisy is unbelievable. But the problem is the carnage. All of those children, all of those young men, they have families, they have mothers, they have people who love them. When are we as a nation going to wake up and recognize that this is a severe internal problem that we have to deal with? It's the family structure that has deteriorated to the point where people no longer have values. We're divorcing ourselves from morality. The church is no longer relevant. And what are we substituting for it? Alinsky-type philosophy. Saul Alinsky, Hillary Clinton's hero, that she wrote her thesis about, whose book, Rules for Radical, is dedicated to Lucifer. This is where we're going. We have got to wake up.
All right, Dr. Carson, always good to see you, and I suspect you'll be in that administration.
You realize
too.
that the federal government has essentially been arming these cartels. What goes through your mind?
We feel it's a betrayal. 42,000 people have been killed, and these weapons that our own government facilitated to these violent criminals in Mexico, 200+ people we know have been killed by them. So there's responsibility for that. 200+. And we also now have our hero in the Border Patrol, as you know, Agent Brian Terry, killed on American soil. 3 guns have been found at the murder scene. All 3 of them were connected to this program. And so for us, I'm fearful, not just my deputies, other officers, citizens in America, that we're going to be facing the barrels of guns that have been put in the hands of the most violent criminals in North America. And who's going to be held accountable?
I want to read something that you said or quoted as saying, if somebody gives a gun to somebody knowing they're going to commit murder, guess what we call them? We call them accomplices. Do you think the ATF have been accomplices to murder?
Absolutely.
So you're saying what they were doing was criminal?
Absolutely. Not just these individual agents, but people up the chain of command who have made the decision. The U.S. Attorney for Arizona just resigned. And this is a big deal. Now it's one step away from Eric Holder. This is his Department of Justice, and there are people who have lost their lives. We have broken countless treaties with our neighbor Mexico, and we have a hand and responsibility in this violence that has come to the United States. But more importantly, Mexico is our partner. They're not our enemy, and we facilitated guns into the cartels that have worked to topple the Mexican government.
From a law enforcement standpoint, I mean, did this operation make any sense at all?
It doesn't. Where it came from is this concept when we allow drugs or cash or sometimes a criminal walk. We may watch a crime in progress where we can take lawful action. We allow that criminal to go in an effort to watch it spiderweb and to see how many people we can catch. They use the same concept with weapons, and this is pure insanity. It's never been done before to give weapons like this, and their idea was to track the weapons. There was no tracking mechanism. Now all these guns are nowhere to be found, and for years this will haunt the conscience of America rightly.
John Dodson, a federal agent, says what he was asked to do was beyond belief.
You were intentionally letting guns go to Mexico.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the agency was.
An alcohol, tobacco, and firearms senior agent assigned to this Phoenix office since 2010, Dodson's job is to stop gun trafficking across the border. Instead, he says he was ordered to sit by and watch it happen. Investigators call the tactic letting guns walk, in this case into the hands of criminals who would use them in Mexico and the U.S. Dodson's bosses say that never happened. Now he's risking his job to go public.
I'm boots on the ground here in Phoenix and telling you we've been doing it every day since I've been here. Here I am. Tell me I didn't do the things that I did. Tell me You didn't order me to do the things that I did. Tell me it didn't happen. Now you have a name on it. You have a face to put with it. Here I am. Someone now. Tell me it didn't happen.
Agent Dodson and other insiders say the gun-walking strategy was approved all the way to the Justice Department. The idea was to see where the guns ended up, build a big case, and take down a major cartel. And it was all kept secret from Mexico. ATF named the case Fast and Furious. This surveillance video obtained by CBS News shows suspected drug cartel suppliers carrying boxes of weapons to their cars at a Phoenix gun shop. Those long boxes being loaded into the red car are AK-47 type assault rifles.
He's out again, carrying another, appears to be 5 boxes of hard case Pelican that would hold a pistol.
So it turns out ATF not only allowed the guns to walk, they videotaped it. Documents show the inevitable result. The guns ATF let go began showing up at crime scenes in Mexico. And as ATF stood by, watching thousands of weapons hit the street, the Fast and Furious Group supervisor noted the escalating Mexican violence. 958 killed in March 2010, the most violent month since 2005. The same email notes, our subjects purchased 359 firearms during March alone, including numerous Barrett 50 caliber rifles.
Did you feel that ATF was partly perhaps to blame for the escalating violence in Mexico and on the border?
Yes, ma'am. I even asked them if they could see the correlation between the two. The more that our guys buy, the more violence that we're having down there.
Senior agents, including Dodson, told us they confronted their supervisors over and over.
And what was the answer? What did they say?
If you're going to make an omelet, you got to scramble some eggs.
There was so much opposition to the gun walking that an ATF supervisor issued this email noting a schism among the agents. Whether you care or not, people of rank and authority at headquarters are paying close attention to this case. We are doing what they envisioned. If you don't think this is fun, you're in the wrong line of work. Maybe the Maricopa County Jail is hiring detention officers, and you can get $30,000 to serve lunch to inmates.
We just knew it wasn't going to end well. There's no way it could.
Then, on December 14, 2010, Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was gunned down. Dodson got the bad news from a colleague.
And they said, did you hear about the Border Patrol agent? And I said, yeah. And I said, well, you know, it was one of Fast and Furious guns. And there's really not much you can say after that.
2 assault rifles ATF had let walk nearly a year before, similar to these, were found at Terry's murder.
I felt guilty. I mean, it's crushing. I don't know how to explain it. I mean,
Dodson and a dozen other ATF sources have all told the same story to Senator Grassley, who's investigating.
You've tried to get some answers from ATF. What's been the response?
The response has been practically zilch, from the standpoint that documents we want, we have not gotten them, and I think it's a case of stonewalling.
Dodson says he hopes that speaking out helps the family of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. They haven't been told much of anything about his murder or where the bullet came from.
First of all, I would tell him that I'm sorry. Second of all, I would tell him that I've done everything that I can for them to get the truth. After this, I don't know what else I can do, but I hope they get it.
Dodson says they never did take down a drug cartel. However, he says thousands of Fast and Furious weapons are still out there and will be claiming victims on both sides of the border for years to come. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.